these are the measurements I'll be working with. Do well to also check my other YouTube video on how I made that shirt. Welcome once again. The first thing to do will be the making of the waistline. I'll be taking 1 inch from the top and I'll be doing that on different position. After doing that, I'll be making use of my ruler to join all points with a broken line, and that will be our waistline. The waistline for the front piece will be 1/2 inch lower than this line, while that of the back piece will be 3/4 inch higher than this line. Next, I'll be taking 2 inches from the side, and that 2 inches will be the account of our sewing allowance or seam allowance or sewing excess, depending on how you call it. After which I will join all points with a straight line. Mind you, the back piece would be what will contain that sewing allowance, not the front piece. I'll go straight to the length and I'll be marking 20.5 inches. The short length is actually 21 inches. So from this 20.5 inches you see me marking, 1/2 inch will be lost to a 2-inch waistband, which will now give the final result 21 inches. After which I will go straight to the crotch and I'll be taking 10 inches from the waistline. I'll be marking my 10 inches on different positions, after which I'll be joining with a ruler to create my crotch line. That line will also serve as my thigh line. Next, I'll be taking my hip measurement. My hip is actually 40 inches and that will be divided by 4 to give me 10 inches. I'll mark it on the crotch line and I'll also mark it on the waist line. I'll be joining both points with a straight line. Next, I'll be taking my thigh measurement. That is 23 divided by 2, which is 11.5 inches. I'll be adding an additional 1 inch for crotch ease. I'll be taking 2 inches upward on the hip line and I'll be joining to that 1 inch point. Now for the down line, I'm a little bit skeptical of how wide I want it to be. I'll be marking 12 inches, which is 24 divided by 2, but I think I'll be wanting it to be a little bit smaller than that 12 inches point. So when I'm making use of my ruler to straighten out the line, I'll be reducing that line a bit, which you can see. I'll take the measurement of the down line. The measurement of the folding of the down line is actually 1.5 inches, and I'll be making use of my ruler to straighten it out. And just to get the perfect folding, I'll be going up the down line by 1.5 inches also, of which I'll be taking that measurement after I finish making use of my ruler to join the 1.5 line with a broken line. Then I'll take the measurement of that point and I'll transfer it to the folding of the down line before I actually join, and this will make my folding process actually perfect. For the waistline, I came down by 1/2 inch, then I use a straight line to join to that point, and that's for the front piece. For the back piece, I'll go up by 3/4 inches, but this time I will join to the beginning of that line like that, and that is for the back piece. Now we've started the back piece, so for the back piece I'll add 1 inch, then I'll make a curve from that line to join the 1 inch point, and that is for the excesses for your bum bum. After which I will join all broken points. After cutting the back piece, I'll be going straight to the cutting of the front piece. First will be to remove the 1 inch for the crotch, then the waistline, then last will be the 2 inches sewing allowance. On doing that, I've succeeded in creating my front piece. Then for the pocket, I'll take 7 inches, then I'll make a 1/2 inch notch. I'll also make a slant. You can make yours 2.5 or 3 inches depending on how wide you want your slant to be and the size of your pocket cover. On cutting the fabric of the back piece, I added interface to the slant of the pocket on the wrong face. and that is to make the slant sharp. You could see my notches. I made notches on the 7 inches down line and also on the 2.5 inches on the top line, and that is to give my pocket the perfect slant. I did that for the right and also for the left leg of the short. Next thing I'll be doing will be to start working on it, and that will be the creation of the pocket. The pocket is not actually the same material with the fabric we are working with. The pocket is a refurbished lining. So I'll be using the actual fabric to make pocket cover, and I folded the edges of the pocket cover. That pocket cover would cover the left pocket, and I will make stitches on the edge to hold it down. While the other pocket cover would cover the right pocket, I would also be making stitches on the edge to hold it down. After fixing our pocket cover, I'll be fixing the pocket itself, and I'll be placing the pocket at the wrong face of the fabric. Then I'll be making a notch on the exact position I notched the fabric. After notching, I'll be bending the pocket to the exact slant bending of the fabric. After bending the pocket, I'll be making a 1/2 inch stitch from the top to the down line of the notch. We've made our 1/2 inch stitch, and we did that for the right and also for the left part of the piece. So after that, you will fold the excesses inward by 1/4 inch, and you will stitch on it to hold the pocket material down as well. You do the same for the other piece. So the excesses is loose, but you fold it by 1/4 inch and make a stitch to hold it down, and it becomes firmly attached to the pocket. After holding it down, you just close off the pocket like that. After closing it off, you sew the down line by 1/2 inch and whip it if you have a whipping machine. You also make a stitch on the top to hold the fabric and the pocket down together, so the down and also the top. On the initial piece, we would also do the same. After closing it up, we would sew the down line of the pocket by 1/2 inch and also sew the top of the pocket to hold it down to the pocket. The top has been stitched down with the pocket to hold it down, the down line as well. The side is a bit loose, but that will be done when we are joining the front and the back piece. I'll place the back piece on the front piece side by side, right side facing right side. Then I'll make a 1/2 inch stitch to hold the front and the back, including the side of the pocket. So 3 of them will be held down by that 1/2 inch stitch, after which I will rearrange and make stitch on the other side too. After stitching both sides, I'll turn it to the right face and start working on the fixing of the zip. For us to fix the zip, we need to turn both pieces to the right face. To fix our zip, the first thing is to attach the zip to the edge of the right flap. After attaching the zip to the edge of the right flap, we'll abandon that for now and work on the part that will contain the flap. I will mark 6.5 inches and make a 1/2 inch notch. After making that 1/2 inch notch, I'll place the part that contains the attached zip right face facing right face. Then I will make a stitch from the notch part upwards. After making that stitch, I'll leave that part for now. The other part, I'll be making a 6 inches mark and making a 1/2 inch notch. Remember, the initial one was 6.5, but this would be 6 inches because this needs to be higher than the initial one because it needs to cover the notch of the initial one. After making that 1/2 inch notch, I'll place the other flap and make a stitch from the top to the 1/2 inch notch mark. After stitching it to the 1/2 inch notch, I'll be notching the flap itself on the 1/2 inch notch mark. So initially it was just the piece that was notched. Now I'll be notching the flap itself, so both will now be notched on the same point, so the turning will be easy. So I'll turn it to the front for you to see. Then the sewing allowance, I will bend to that other part. After bending, I will stitch on the edge of the flap. Now, stitching on the edge of the flap would also mean I'll be stitching down the sewing allowance I bent to the underside. After stitching it down on the edge to hold it down and also the sewing allowance underneath it, it becomes easy for you to bend to the other side. When you bend to the other side, the flap face only the other side. It does not show on the right face. So after that, the next part would be the joining of both legs of the short. And you join both legs of a short through the part of the fixing of the zip. So it is when you are fixing the zip, you actually join the right to the left part. So after placing the right part like that, that left part, you will place it now on the right part. Now, while placing it, you will realize that one will be ½ inch higher than the other in terms of the position of the notch. So one will be ½ inch higher in terms of, so as you can see, I bent the excesses on of the flap on the top before I place it, just so you can see. So I can place it, so the top will actually be the same, but the down part, one of the notch will be higher than the other. So the one higher, and you also give a gap before the zip, a gap. So that ½ inch gap would be what will make the left part cover the right part when you are done with the fixing of the zip. So after that, I'll be making a stitch from the higher notch position now, and that stitch will go up until the top of the back. That stitch will go up until the top of the back. There will be no consideration of the waist because the waist will contain a rubber. After stitching from that notch point to the crotch up until the top of the back, you can see the stitching line. That would mean we've successfully joined the right and the left leg of the short together. After joining, the only thing remaining to be joined is the zip. The zip is now on one part of the flap. So the next thing will be to join the zip to the other part of the flap. So the right part of the flap actually contains the whole zip. To join the zip to the other part of the flap, the first thing will be to close the zip, after which we will use the upper part of the flap to cover the lower part of the flap. After covering the lower part of the flap, I'll be making use of a pin to hold it down. Now, the coverage of the flap with the upper part on the lower part is the time you have to arrange the front part of the flap the way you want. If you want the upper part to be a ½ inch wider in terms of the coverage, this is the time. If you want it by ½ inch, this is the time, but a ½ inch is more advisable. So after using a pin to hold it down, I'll be closing both flaps together just to make sure they're in position, because the pin holding it down is actually keeping everything in position. So the part that does not contain the flap is what you are seeing now. I'll close both down like that just to make sure I'm not deviating from the arrangement I created from the front. So after closing it down, I'll make sure I stitch the zip to the part that doesn't contain the flap only, and I'll stitch the zipper on the edge of the zipper on the flap that doesn't contain the zipper. After attaching the zip to the other flap, we've succeeded in joining, or should I say fixing, our zip. So you see me closing it, but I'm not closing it to the top, and that is because I have trimmed the excesses of the zip on the top. So closing it to the top will mean I'll be spoiling the whole work. For the waistband, the height is 1.5 inches, and other excesses I folded inwards. What I only did was to make sure the back was a ½ inch longer than the front. That's the downline of the back. So you saw the way I folded it. After folding it, I'll place it on the beginning of the left part like that. Then by ½ inch, I'll insert the short inside the waistband. After inserting it inside the waistband, I will make a stitch. So you can see there's still a hole inside the waistband. When I mean a hole, I mean a passage from the front, and that would be where I'll pass the rubber. The rubber I'll be using is a 1-inch rubber. So I'll be stitching on the edge of the waistband, on the edge of the downline of the waistband. Remember I said I passed the short by ½ inch inside the waistband. This is not your regular kind of short. Normally when you make shorts that have zip, you don't usually put rubber on the waistband. I decided to just do something totally different. So normally the whole zip kind of short is a bit technical. So this is more easier. So you could see the excesses after fixing the band. So I will trim it to remain at least 1 inch of the excess. After which I will bend like I did for the beginning part, then fold. Then complete the stitching to the end part of the down line. The waistband is totally fixed now. Next is the rubber. I'll be piercing the rubber with a nail. Then I'll be passing it through the passage of the waistband. There is a hole. I call it the passage. So I'll be passing from one beginning and also bringing the rubber out at the other end. You can see the rubber. So now we are going to hold the rubber down by sewing on the edge of the zip. On the edge of the zip, that stitch would just go down like that, and that stitch would hold the rubber down on the right side. Now on the left side, it will be the flap stitch, what I call the flap stitch. So I mostly prefer 1¼ inches when I'm making my flap stitch, and it will be from the top. So I'll be using a chalk to mark it out just so you can see, just to make it visible. It is a very important stitch because it holds down the flap that have the zip attached to it on the left side. Mind you, both flaps have the zip attached to them. So when you open your zip, the right part goes to the right flap and the left part goes to the left flap. So this stitch will help in holding down the flap. Your stitch must not be wider than your flap. You must make sure your stitch is well within the size of the flap so it can hold it down. Then the stitch will also hold the rubber down from the top. So once again, your flap should be wider than your stitch and not the other way around. So you must make sure your stitches are neat because this is also part of the finishing. We've done the flap stitch and the other stitch, so they've both held down the rubber. The next thing will be to cut the excess of the rubber, so I will drag it out and cut, and I'll also do the same for the other part. I will drag it out and cut. After cutting out the rubber, the passage that allowed the rubber remains open, and that will be closed when we are doing the finishing. The next thing I'll be doing will be to fix our buttonhole and also our button underneath. And the part you see me marking out is where the buttonhole will be, and underneath is where the button would be. Next is to take our short length. So from the tip of the waistband, I'll be taking 21 inches. 21 inches, which is our desired short, right from the pattern drafting. After marking, I'll be folding what is left as our excess. I'll be folding it inwards, and on that folding I'll be sewing on the edge of the folding inwards. As I took the length on the right side, I would also be taking the length on the left side. I'll mark at 21, bend inwards and sew on the edge of the folding. On sewing the down lines, fixing the button and buttonhole, we've succeeded in concluding the final part of the making of this shot. The next is the finishing, and that is just to check for the fitting of the shot on my body. I think the downline is a little bit too wide for my taste. I'll be reducing it a bit. Both flaps will be held together, and I'll be showing you how. Yeah, the downline is a bit too wide for my liking, so I'll be reducing it a bit. Normally, for fabrics with flowering design, I would allow a wider downline, but since this is a plain fabric, I want it a bit smaller. The final part of the finishing of any attire that contains a zip, be it a trouser or a short, is the joining of both flaps. So after turning it to the wrong face, you close the zip back, then you join both flaps together and you make a stationary stitch. Some people just use a zigzag to just make a half-inch stitch. When I mean stationary, I mean the stitches doesn't go very far, just one point. You stitch for a while on one point. Then the reason we are joining both flaps is because when you open your zip, you don't want the down part of the flap not to cover your underwear. You see, that part of the flap will just go inside like that, and that is a default if you don't stitch both flaps together. So it has to come out and cover the underwear, and that is what you get from joining both flaps together.